My name is Gwinnup. I am a water resources engineer with Emmons and Oliver Resources, and I'm here in Coralville, Iowa, next to Biscuit Creek. It is a small urban stream. The drainage area is about 1 square mile. It's almost completely urban, and it has developed over the last several decades. And as that development occurs, it puts increasing pressure on the stream with more runoff and more pollutant loading. And so because of that, there's more need for restoration and stabilization in order to keep up with that development. Biscuit Creek is a really interesting stream. It's always been here, but it used to be a much more rural and agricultural setting, and as the city has developed, the drainage area becomes more impervious, which means there's more runoff and more urban pollutants that stress the stream system as a whole. And so because of that stress, factors like stream bank erosion and invasive vegetation start to creep in and add more pressure and need for stream restoration. So in the watershed of this stream, like all others, are things like schools and houses and driveways and storm sewers. And every time that it rains, the water that runs off of the watershed goes down the yard or the driveway or the rooftop and the downspout, and it runs through pipes or over the land surface, and it runs into the stream. And when it does that, it takes with it pollutants. It might be debris and trash. It might be nutrients such as yard fertilizer or pet waste. All of these things wash off into the stream, and they create problems for the stream ecosystem and the aquatic inhabitants that live there. And so anything that we do in the watershed, as far as human civilization and humanity goes, affects the stream. The stream is where we often see the result of how we live in the watershed. The stream is a reflection of the watershed that serves it. And so the easiest way to keep the stream clean is to keep the watershed clean. There was a stream rehabilitation project done here quite a while ago, over 10 years, I believe. And they cleaned up the stream corridor, removed a lot of the invasive woody vegetation, and planted a bunch of native grasses and forbs. And as you can see, they're doing pretty good. They're getting fairly well established. There is some non-native weedy material in there, as there often is, but a little bit of maintenance will take care of that. Generally speaking, it's a fairly straight stream corridor. It's not very sinuous or meandered, but generally speaking, it's fairly healthy. The riparian corridor often has a buffer width on each side that has native vegetation. You can see that it's a little bit wider on this side than the other side, but there is a recreational trail over there. I'm sure they were trying to make room for that when they originally laid this out. And again, this is a combination public space. So we have a school and a playground, recreational trail, and they did a pretty good job here of balancing some space for ecology, nature, and wildlife, as well as the human recreational elements for the trail and the bridge and the school and whatnot. When you first build a stream restoration project, the vegetation takes a little while to establish. The earthwork and the rocks and the other engineering elements are pretty quick and easy to install, but the native vegetation establishment takes a while. It takes several years for it to get established, and in that time, that definitely takes a little bit more human input in the maintenance to get those plants established to the point where they maintain themselves after that. And so in a case like this, you have to come in and weed whack or mow the vegetation that does come up to about 8 to 10 inches. And keep doing that for a couple of years. That gives the native vegetation a chance to get its roots established and then get up above the ground before all the non-native weedy and woody vegetation gets up and steals all the sunlight. And so this patch here behind me is in pretty good shape. It's been growing for over a decade as far as I know. And There are some invasive vegetation examples in here. There's some sourdock and woody trees and other things like that that need a little bit of care here and there, but not nearly so bad as some other locations. We'll take a look at another location here on Biscuit Creek in a moment that has had no restoration, at least not recently, and it's pretty choked with a lot of invasive honeysuckle and poison ivy and lots of other woody vegetation. So this section of urban stream is pretty well overgrown, and green is good, right? Well, sometimes it's not quite as good as it could be. This is pretty dense, so aesthetically it's hard to even see the stream, and this is pretty typical of a lot of urban streams. But as well, functionally, this density of woody vegetation is not really helpful for the stream. The root systems from trees and woody vegetation like that aren't that great at holding together a stream bank. They're okay, but not as good as native grasses and forbs. Grasses especially, because they have a really deep, hairy, fine root system, and that acts like rebar in the soil, kind of like concrete. It holds the soil together, so when you get high flows in a stream, the soil and the stream banks hold together really well with that native vegetation. But that can't grow in a shaded woody environment like this. So we'll remove a lot of the woody undergrowth, but we'll leave some of the bigger trees to leave some dappled shade, but we want some full sun areas so that the native grasses and forbs can grow and hold the stream banks together really well. As well, you'll see in the woody vegetation here, there's a lot of nuisance vegetation like poison ivy and things like that. And an urban stream oftentimes is where a lot of kids go to play, and they play outdoors in these areas. I know I did when I was a kid. I spent a lot of time in the stream behind our house, and so that's one reason why I feel it's important to keep these streams in good condition and clean, is because this is where our kids go to play, and this is where they learn to enjoy nature and experience the world around them and observe wildlife. So there's a lot of pollution in the stream that you can see, trash and debris and things like that, and that's obvious. There's also a lot of pollution that you can't see. And when your kids are down there playing in the stream, it pays to think about these things and what's in the water as a result of our human development. There's all kinds of things like nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. Those get a lot of attention in the Midwest here lately. But there's also a lot of other stuff like heavy metals, cadmium for one. If you think about the tires on your car, you have to replace those once in a while because they wear thin, right? Where does that tire tread go? It goes into the pavement, and that gets washed off every time it rains. It goes into the stream in tiny little microscopic particles, and it's full of all kinds of things like cadmium and other heavy metals. Those tend to get concentrated in our urban detention basins and wetlands and streams, and if they get sequestered in the vegetation and the soil along a floodplain, that's one thing. It's fairly dispersed and it can be broken down or assimilated into nature. But if it gets concentrated in one place, like the stream sediment, then it really starts to add up. And so all kinds of things like heavy metals, PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, these are all products from petroleum combustion. These tend to accumulate in the sediment in our urban ponds and streams. So this section of stream does need some work. It certainly can be improved, and we are considering this stretch of stream for a restoration project. What we'll do is thin out some of the dense undergrowth, and we'll lay the banks back a bit so that they're a lower slope, a little bit safer and more stable. We will revegetate with good native grasses and forbs, and we'll try to add some more riffle pool structure so that it's not just a straight run trapezoidal channel. We want to add a little bit of babbling brook and making the water run over rocks and form pools so that the fish and the bugs have a place to live, and that's a fun place for kids to play as well. It makes a a healthy ecosystem, but it also makes a cool neighborhood amenity and improves the way the neighborhood looks. Well, this is Riverfront Crossings Park in Iowa City, Iowa. And this location is the former site of a 24-acre wastewater treatment plant. It was destroyed in the 2008 flood. And for that reason, because we're situated between Ralston Creek on the east and the Iowa River on the west, this site is prone to flooding. And so the city decided to turn this into a floodplain park. For the most part, most of this park is floodable and resilient, and when the water comes up, it's wet, and when it goes back down, it's a city park. And so one of the requirements of the funding that they received from the EPA was that they restore some streams, floodplains, and wetlands when they created this park. And so behind me, you can see a stream oxbow that we built on Ralston Creek to add a 1/4 mile of stream length and several acres of wetland as well. And so part of the point of that is to clean up the water from Ralston Creek as much as possible before it rejoins the Iowa River. This site is at the base of about a 8 square mile drainage area, and a lot of that is downtown and east side Iowa City. And so it's a heavily urbanized watershed. And so the wetlands and reconnected floodplains here do work fairly well. At times, you might even say they work a little too well because they do tend to accumulate a lot of trash and debris from that urban runoff. The water's up right now from the Iowa River, and so we do get some floodplain backwater effects where the water comes back up Ralston Creek into this wetland area. And then when the water goes back down, we have some resilient native vegetation that will spring back to life and help clean the water of all the nutrients and urban pollutants. So this project is one example where engineers and landscape architects work together to, you might say, de-engineer this site. They removed the wastewater treatment plant and restored this natural wetland system. When we designed the oxbow behind us, we were looking for geometric inspiration, and we found a 1930s map of the original stream that was here before they built the wastewater treatment plant. We traced that outline, and we, within reason, recreated the shape as much as we possibly could when we restored this stream. One motivation for urban stream restoration, which is sort of ironic at this park because it is the former site of a wastewater treatment plant, is that urban stream restoration helps to clean up the effluent of humanity's runoff, kind of like a wastewater treatment plant cleans up the sanitary waste from humanity. All the pollutants and the debris that run off of the watershed go into the streams, and then the streams go to the rivers, and the river goes to the Gulf. And anything that we can do to restore a stream's connection with its floodplains and its wetlands goes a long ways towards removing those pollutants from our civilized, developed areas before it gets into the lakes and oceans. And the restored stream area makes it a lot more aesthetically appealing, increases quality of life, increases ecological connectivity, and creates habitat. It also spurs development. A lot of this area was businesses like lumber yards, and now we've got developing apartments and commercial businesses, and it has spurred new life into this area of town.